Baseball's history spans over a century and a half. Across that time, thousands of players have taken the field. Legends, role players, journeymen, and stars. But only 7 men have ever reached the elusive mark of 60 home runs in a single season. Some got there through pure talent. Others may have had a little help. But the first to do it didn't have any, because he reached the milestone fueled only by cigars, hot dogs, and one of the most naturally gifted swings the game has ever seen. Enter 1927 Babe Ruth. Before 1927, no one had even considered that 60 home runs could be possible. The game wasn't built for it. Baseball was still clawing its way out of the dead ball era, when teams played for 1 run at a time, and a good offensive inning meant a bunt, a stolen base, and a bloop single to left. Home runs were accidents. Nice when they happened, but nobody expected them. Then, Babe Ruth came along and treated the outfield fence like it was a suggestion. By the time 1927 rolled around, Ruth had already reshaped the way people thought about the game. But that season, he did something that pushed the boundaries of what seemed even humanly possible. The Yankees were loaded. Lou Gehrig hitting right behind him, Tony Lazzeri, Earl Combs, maybe the most feared lineup ever assembled. But even in that stacked lineup, Ruth stood out as a different kind of threat. That year, he didn't just lead the league in home runs. He had more than every other team in the American League except his own. The Washington Senators hit just 29 as a team. Ruth hit 60, and he did it without any modern training. No supplements, no launch angle obsession, just a natural swing, absurd hand-eye coordination, and the kind of raw power that only comes from a diet of one-night stands and cheap beer. His 60th home run came on the last day of the season against Washington's Tom Zachary, and when Ruth crossed the plate, it was clear that the game would never be the same. Ruth's 1927 season changed the entire direction of the sport. He didn't just popularize the home run, he made it the centerpiece of baseball's identity. He filled ballparks, sold newspapers, and made the Yankees the Yankees. The sport never went back. As much as his number sat there in the record books, it also hovered over every power hitter who came after him, a reminder of how far you had to go to be considered the best. So when someone finally came along who looked like they might take that number down, it wasn't just history on the line, it was legacy. And the man who stepped into that pressure was Roger Maris.
Here comes Roger Maris. Just standing up, waiting to see if Maris is going to hit number 61.
When Roger Maris went after Babe Ruth's record in 1961, he wasn't just swinging at fastballs, he was swinging at a ghost. Maris didn't fit the mold of a superstar. He didn't have Ruth's flair, didn't have Mantle's charisma, and he didn't want the spotlight that came with chasing history. He was a quiet Midwesterner playing for the most famous team in the sport, in the biggest city in the country, trying to surpass the most iconic number baseball had ever known. And a lot of people didn't want him to do it. Even before the season ended, the narrative was turning against him. This was the first year the American League expanded to 162 games, and Commissioner Ford Frick, a close friend of Ruth's, declared that Maris would need to hit his 61st within the first 154 games to be considered the true record holder. It wasn't an official rule, but it was enough to create doubt, to throw cold water on one of the great power displays the game had ever seen. Maris didn't just have to hit the ball out of the park, he had to do it under a microscope, with every reporter questioning whether he would even deserve to be in the conversation. Through the summer, most eyes were on Mickey Mantle, who looked like the more likely candidate to catch Ruth, until a hip injury ended his chase in early September. That left Maris alone with the weight of history, and you could see what it was doing to him. The stress was visible, clumps of hair falling out, quiet interviews, uneasy at bats, but the man kept showing up. He hit number 60 on September 26, and 5 days later, in the Yankees' final regular season game, he stepped in against Boston's Tracy Stallard and drove one into the right field seats. Home run number 61. More than Ruth, more than anyone, and the crowd wasn't sure what to do. There was applause, sure, but it didn't feel like a coronation. There was no national celebration, no parade, just quiet history. Maris had done something remarkable, something no one else ever had, and it took decades for people to appreciate it. His record stood for 37 years, through expansion, integration, night games, and rising home run totals. It was honest, it was earned, and for a long time, it was untouchable, until the summer of 1998 when everything changed.
3-0. Sammy hits a high fly ball, deep right center. Back goes Merced to the wall and right, looking up, leaping. That ball is gone for a home run.
When the summer of '98 arrived, Maris's number suddenly wasn't just a record, it was a target. Baseball had spent the last few years searching for a new identity after the '94 strike, and what it found was a home run race so electric, it didn't just bring people back to the ballpark, it made the game must-see television. At the center of it all was Sammy Sosa. Entering the season, he wasn't the favorite. That was Mark McGwire, the muscle-bound Cardinal who had crushed 58 home runs the year before. But Sosa turned the race into a spectacle, not just because he was matching McGwire swing for swing, but because he played with a kind of joy that made the whole thing feel alive. In June, he hit 20 home runs, still a major league record for a single month. And by August, he had turned what once looked like a solo pursuit into a neck-and-neck sprint. McGwire got to 62 first, but Sosa wasn't far behind, finishing with 66 home runs, a .308 average, and 158 RBIs, numbers that earned him the NL MVP and brought the Cubs back to the playoffs. But Sosa wasn't done. In 1999, he had 63 more. In 2001, he added 64. Over 4 seasons from 98 through 01, he had 243 home runs, more than anyone in a 4-year span in baseball history. And yet somehow, he never led the league in any of those years. That's how wild the era was. But the story of Sosa isn't just about numbers, it's about what he represented. He was the spark baseball needed. All smiles, chest taps, finger kisses, and sky points. He turned every home run into a celebration. But as time passed and the glow of the era began to fade, questions started creeping in. Sosa was later linked to PEDs, and in 2003, he was caught using a corked bat. His name appeared on the list of players who tested positive during anonymous 2003 drug testing. And although he's always denied knowingly using anything illegal, the damage was done. The Hall of Fame never came calling. The Cubs distanced themselves, and the legacy became complicated. But for those few years, when the lights were bright and the games actually felt bigger, Sosa was the heartbeat of baseball, and the only man in history to hit 60-plus home runs not once, not twice, but 3 different times. Yet, he was always somehow number 2 when it came to leading the league in homers. And most of the time, he was number 2 to none other than Mark Big Mac McGwire.
Down the left field line, is it enough? Gone! There it is! 62!
Mark McGwire didn't just steal the spotlight in 1998, he cracked it wide open. While Sammy Sosa danced his way into America's hearts, McGwire was a different kind of force. Quiet, intimidating, and when he connected, the ball didn't just leave the yard, it disappeared into the night like it had a plane to catch. By the time that season started, McGwire was already a legend in the making. He hit 49 homers as a rookie, led the league multiple times, and mashed 58 the year before. Everyone knew he had the kind of power that could chase history. What nobody knew was how fast he'd do it. He hit 27 home runs before June. The pace wasn't just record-breaking, it was surreal. The only thing more absurd than his home run count was the size of the crowds following his every move. His batting practice sessions were events. Networks would cut into programming just to show his at-bats live. When he hit number 62 on September 8th, a screaming line drive that barely cleared the left field wall at Busch Stadium, the stadium erupted. Sosa, playing right field for the Cubs that night, ran in to embrace him. It was one of the purest moments in baseball history. 2 men chasing the same impossible number. 1 record, 1 celebration. But McGwire didn't stop at 62. He kept swinging, kept hitting balls into orbit. And by season's end, he had crushed 70. It was the kind of number that didn't even sound real. And when he followed it up with 65 more in 1999, the legend grew. 135 home runs in 2 seasons. More than Ruth or Maris had in their best 2-year spans combined. But like so many from that era, the story doesn't end there. Years later, McGwire admitted to using steroids during his career, including during the 1998 season. For some, that changed everything. The Hall of Fame doors stayed shut, and his records became fodder for debates about what counts and what doesn't. But for one summer, McGwire made baseball feel magical again. He gave the game a pulse, he brought fans back, and he raised the bar so high that it felt untouchable. Until one man came along and turned even 70 into just another number. That man, Barry Bonds. Post-beard hitter transformed into something even scarier, unbeatable. But what makes that season so hard to comprehend is that Barry Bonds didn't need it. He was already a 3-time MVP, already a 400 guy, already the best player of his generation. Before the juice era swallowed baseball whole, Bonds was putting up numbers that didn't need help. But in 2001, something changed. Maybe it was watching Sosa and McGwire get the glory, maybe it was ego, maybe it was boredom. Whatever it was, Bonds didn't just decide to join the arms race, he decided to end it. He hit 39 home runs before the All-Star break. He was walked 177 7 times because teams knew the only way to beat him was to avoid him. Even that didn't work. He still finished with a .328 batting average, 137 RBIs, a .515 on-base percentage, and a slugging percentage so insane it looked like a typo, .863. He was playing a different sport. And yes, the steroid allegations hung over all of it. Bonds was the central figure in the Balco scandal. While he never failed an official test, the evidence was overwhelming. His body had changed, his head had changed, his numbers had changed, and so did the public's opinion. To many, he was a villain, but to others, he was just playing by the same rules, or lack of them, that everyone else was. Either way, 73 home runs remains the highest single season total in MLB history. And it's not just a record, it's a monument to an era, to a player, to a game to let it happen. 73 hasn't been seriously threatened in over 2 decades, but one man, a Yankee fittingly, got closer than anyone thought possible. A clean slate, a towering swing, and a season that reminded us what greatness could look like without all the noise. Enter Aaron Judge.
High fly ball, deep left. There it goes, soaring into history. He's done it.
Aaron Judge didn't just chase history in 2022, he made it feel pure again. For decades, the single season home run record had lived in the shadow. McGwire, Sosa, Bonds, they turned the number into a spectacle, but the aftermath left it radioactive. No one wanted to touch it, not because it was unbeatable, but because chasing it meant stepping into the noise. And then Judge came along, a 6'7" mountain of a man with a swing built for Yankee Stadium and a demeanor that couldn't be more opposite for the bombastic stars of the steroid era. What he did in 2022 felt different from the start. There was no rival slugger keeping pace, no mid-season controversy, just one man swinging the bat like it was 1961 again. He hit 60 on September 20th, tying Ruth. Then he hit 61, matching Maris. On October 4th, with the entire baseball world watching, he launched number 62 into left field seats in Texas, breaking the American League record and setting a new bar for what a clean power season could look like. He did it with the weight of the Yankees franchise on his back, in a contract year, with cameras following his every move, and somehow he never flinched. Judge finished with a .311 average, 131 RBIs, and a league-leading 1.111 OPS. It was one of the most dominant offensive seasons anyone had ever seen. There was no whispers, no asterisks, no need to wonder if it was real. For the first time in decades, fans could celebrate a home run record without caveat. And for many, including members of the Maris family, Judge's 62 became the true record, not just for the American League, but for the game itself. Whether that's fair or not depends on how you view the era that came before him, but what can't be argued is this: Judge brought legitimacy back to the long ball. He gave fans a reason to believe again. After the season, the Yankees paid him like the face of the sport. 9 years, $360 million, and handed him the captaincy once held by Derek Jeter. The baton had officially been passed. In a game still figuring out its identity in the post-steroid era, Judge gave baseball something it desperately needed: clarity. A season to point to and say, this is what greatness looks like. Which is why it's almost poetic that the only person capable of competing with Judge for the 2025 MVP is the most recent addition to the 60 homer club, the Big Dumper.
40,000 chanting MVP. Fly ball to right field, number 60!
Cal Raleigh wasn't supposed to be here. Not because he lacked talent, anyone who watched him at Florida State knew his bat had thunder in it, but because history had already drawn its line in the sand. Catchers don't hit 60 home runs. Switch hitters don't hit 60 home runs. Guys nicknamed Big Dumper don't join Babe Ruth, Roger Maris, and Barry Bonds on baseball's most exclusive list. And yet, in 2025, that's exactly what Raleigh did. His season wasn't built in silence either. It was a summer-long siege. By the end of May, he had already become the first catcher to ever hit 20 homers before June. By July, he'd passed Johnny Bench for the most pre-All-Star break home runs by a primary catcher. By August, he was breaking Mickey Mantle's switch hitting records that had stood untouched for decades, and did it all while squatting behind the plate 4 or 5 nights a week, taking foul tips off his mask, calling games for one of the best rotations in baseball, and still somehow finding the strength to swing like the fences were a mile too close. That's what made it feel so different. The other names on this list were outfielders and first base, sluggers who could coast through defensive innings innings while their bats carried the weight. Raleigh's legs were dead by the 3rd inning most nights, and still, the ball kept flying. He didn't sneak into the club either. His 60th came with authority, a towering blast against the Rockies on September 24th, sending T-Mobile Park into a frenzy and stamping him forever into the record books. Along the way, he became the first player in history to hit 20 home runs from each side of the plate in a season, the first catcher to win a home run derby, and the Mariners' new single-season home run king, passing even Ken Griffey Jr. The story of Cal Raleigh isn't just that he joined the club, it's that he changed what the club even meant. He proved the position doesn't matter, the handedness doesn't matter, the nickname doesn't matter. If you can swing with that kind of violence, the kind of consistency, you belong next to the greats. And in 2025, the kid from North Carolina, the one who grew up idolizing Jason Varitek, carved out a place no one thought possible. Catcher, switch hitter, franchise cornerstone, and now the 7th man in baseball history to crush 60 home runs in a season. Only time will tell if Raleigh has the skill to join an even more exclusive club though, the 2,000 plus club. Watch this video to see why only 5 players in MLB history have ever been talented enough to hit 2K ribbies.